welcome back to my channel. It is September. That means it is PCOS Awareness Month, so I definitely wanted to get some new content out for you guys to help celebrate. It has also been just over a year that I have really been working very hard towards reversing my PCOS symptoms, managing my condition naturally. So I have put together a list of my top 10 tips that I have done to do that, and I thought that I would share it with you guys today. I'm gonna do it in two parts so that this video isn't too long. So make sure you come back for 5 tips next week. I'll be giving you 5 tips today. As always, these are things that have worked specifically for me. PCOS is a spectrum, meaning everybody has different symptoms. No two people with PCOS are the same, and no two people with PCOS should be treated the same. So this video is purely for informational and educational purposes, and it should not be taken as medical advice. So let's jump right into my first 5 tips for how I have been managing my PCOS naturally. And tip number 1 is do not rely on medication to fix you. This is something that I was told from my doctor, that all I needed to do was manage my PCOS is take birth control. And that's really bad advice, and I no longer see that doctor because I do not agree with that approach at all. Now, if you are taking birth control because you don't want to become pregnant, then that's one thing. But if you're taking birth control to fix your PCOS or fix your hormones or fix your menstrual cycle, then I'm sorry to say this, but that is just not what is actually happening. Birth control is suppressing your natural hormone cycles and giving you a fake bleed every month. You are not ovulating, you're not menstruating, and your hormones are being suppressed so that you are not getting all the benefits of what those hormones are supposed to be doing for your body. And as soon as you come off that birth control, you're going to be right back to where you started. It is not a solution for the underlying issue. Now, let's talk about metformin for a second. At least this is addressing one of the root causes of PCOS, which is insulin resistance. But again, do you really want to take metformin for the rest of your life? As soon as you stop taking it, are all of your symptoms and problems going to be coming right back? And metformin also has a ton of side effects as well. So most people, not most people, but a lot of people just cannot tolerate it because of the side effects. So really working towards managing your PCOS using diet and lifestyle is going to be the most sustainable for you long term. Now, I'm not saying don't use pharmaceuticals if you want to. There are so many benefits to using them in the beginning of your PCOS journey, because the side effects of PCOS, like infertility, acne, weight gain, hair loss on your head, hair growth where you do not want it, can really affect your quality of life. But just know that they're probably not addressing the root cause of why you're having those issues. And as soon as you stop taking them, they're going to come right back. So really incorporating diet and lifestyle changes to address the root cause of your PCOS problems is going to be the most sustainable long term for you. So the rest of my tips are going to talk about how I have been addressing the root cause of my PCOS symptoms. And I worked on 3 different issues: insulin resistance, inflammation, and elevated cortisol. So I'll let you know which tip is addressing which issue, so you know if you have identified your root cause, or maybe you have multiple like me, you'll know which tip is going to work on which cause. So tip number 2 is addressing insulin resistance. And this tip has been a game changer for me, and that is to pair your proteins. So what I mean by this, people with insulin resistance, when they eat carbohydrates, tend to have an elevated spike in their blood glucose. That causes our body to release insulin. However, because of our insulin resistance, our body has to produce and release more insulin than the average person. This can lead to a roller coaster of our blood sugar. It goes up really high and it goes down really, really low, which leads to those hangry attacks. So even though you've had a meal, you might feel really hungry, like you need to eat again, not very long after you have just eaten. This is something I really struggled with. I couldn't figure out why, after I just ate breakfast, why I'm hungry again and need to eat again 1 to 2 hours later. And it's because I wasn't pairing my meals with protein. So the worst thing that I was doing was eating something that I thought was healthy, like a bowl of oatmeal with blueberries for breakfast. However, that is very low in protein, so it was causing that roller coaster of my blood sugar. So whenever I have a carbohydrate, I try and pair it with a protein. hopefully a healthy fat as well, and that really helps to stabilize that blood sugar. It doesn't have that big spike. The glucose gets released much more slowly, and we have a much more steady blood sugar that doesn't lead to those cravings and hungry attacks. And we just feel full from our meals, which if you have insulin resistance, you know that is just all that we want. We just want to feel full and satisfied after a meal, and pairing your meals with protein can really help you achieve that. Number 3 is also another tip for managing insulin resistance, and that is to time your carbohydrates. Now, I know there is a lot of information out there talking about how people with PCOS need to eat a low carb diet. Some people are telling you need to go keto and really restrict your carbohydrates. I don't believe that that is necessary for the majority of people. Maybe if you're severely insulin resistant and you really need to get your insulin levels under control, it might be something you need to do temporarily. You can talk to your doctor or your dietitian about that. But for me, my insulin resistance wasn't quite that severe, so I just focus on eating them at certain times of the day. Now, women with PCOS tend to be more insulin sensitive in the morning. So what does that mean? That means that we should be enjoying our carbohydrates earlier in the day when we're more insulin sensitive and when we can burn them off. And it makes sense when you think about it. The whole purpose of eating carbohydrates is to give your body fuel and energy for the day. When do we need energy? In the morning and earlier in the day, for breakfast and for lunch. When do we not need energy? At nighttime before we're about to go to sleep. So you can still eat carbohydrates if you have PCOS. I certainly do. I just try to eat the majority of them in the morning and at lunchtime, and eat a lower carb dinner at nighttime, because that is not when my body needs it. I do not need to be spiking my glucose and my insulin right before I'm going to be going to sleep, and I'm not going to be able to burn it off. So that leads right into tip number 4, and that is after dinner, you are done. I call this gentle intermittent fasting. I don't know if that's actually a term. I just kind of made it up because I feel like the term intermittent fasting can seem like it's very restrictive. People are eating only 1 meal a day. They're not eating for 18 hours, and that is just not something that you need to do to manage your PCOS. At least it's not something that I do to manage my PCOS. So there is a lot of research how having a very well-controlled insulin and glucose level overnight can lead to reversal of your PCOS symptoms and a reversal of a lot of the complications of PCOS, like fatty liver. So you definitely want to not be eating late at night if you are working towards reversing your insulin resistance. So what does that mean for me? That means after dinner, I'm done eating for the day. I'll have some water later, I'll have some tea, but I am not eating anything that is going to produce a glucose response and an insulin spike. So after dinner, I'm done eating until breakfast the next morning. So that actually usually ends up being about a 14-hour fast overnight. Usually I am done eating dinner by 7 p.m. and then usually I eat breakfast around 9 o'clock in the morning most days. So if my math is correct, then that's about a 14-hour fast overnight. Now, 14-hour fast, oh, people might hear that and be like, oh, that's so restrictive. It's not. You're eating dinner, you're eating breakfast, you're not missing any meals, and you're still getting a huge improvement in your glucose metabolism and your insulin levels by doing so. Your body really needs the nighttime to focus on rest and recover. It should not be breaking down food that you have consumed right before bed. So that is something that has been a game changer. I really believe that is what has been responsible for a lot of the weight that I've lost over the past year. I've lost about 25 pounds, and I really think that this gentle intermittent fast overnight is what is responsible for a lot of that weight loss. So give it a try. I promise it's not that restrictive. When you think about it, just when you're done with dinner, you can even eat dessert. Eat your dinner, eat your dessert, and then after that, you're done for the rest of the night. That is still going to provide a much better glucose and insulin control for the nighttime if you just eat your dessert right after your dinner. Don't wait 2-3 hours and have it like 10 o'clock at night later. Just eat it right after your dinner, and that protein from your dinner is going to help mitigate the effects of that sugar from your dessert. So that is tip number 4, and if you're going to take any of these tips, I would definitely suggest thinking about incorporating that one if it's right for you. Okay, tip number 5 has to do with inflammation. So people with PCOS, women with PCOS tend to have chronic low-grade inflammation, and inflammation is what leads to almost the majority of chronic health conditions. So it is definitely something that we want to address for sure. So how do we know if we're intolerant to certain foods? Well, you're not going to know unless you cut them out, unfortunately. So what are some common foods that people may be intolerant to and that are quite inflammatory? Well, sugar is one. Sugar is a very inflammatory food. Obviously, it is something that should be enjoyed in moderation. If you have PCOS or just in general, we should be eating way less sugar than the majority of Americans are consuming. 2 is gluten, and 3 is dairy. So these are 3 foods or food groups that people are commonly eating that they may be either intolerant to and that are creating inflammation. And I have done in-depth videos about how gluten and dairy can negatively affect a woman with PCOS. I'm going to link those videos in the description box because I can't go through all that information again. It would just take so long. So check out those videos. But the only way to know if you're intolerant to a food is to cut it out and see how you feel. So I did exactly that. Last August, I cut them out for 30 days. I actually did the Whole30 diet. I have a few videos on that as well. And then I found when I cut those foods out, my acne cleared up. My acne, I know, is directly related to dairy. Every time I indulge in dairy, I end up breaking out. But I was most surprised that I was intolerant to gluten. Now, I don't have celiac, I'm not allergic to it, and you don't have to be allergic to a food to have a benefit from cutting it out of your diet. I find whenever I'm eating gluten, I end up getting joint pain, especially in my knees. This past weekend, I indulged in a lot of things that I shouldn't have. I was out of town for the weekend and we were doing, a lot of different things. Ended up eating a lot of foods that had gluten in it. And by the end of the weekend, my knees, I could feel the difference. They were really bothering me a lot. So I know that gluten is causing a lot of inflammation in my joints. And if my joints are inflamed, then there are other places in my body where there is inflammation. So for me, cutting out gluten, dairy, and really reducing the amount of sugar that I eat in my diet, I hope that I am doing a good job at reducing that chronic inflammation in my body so that it doesn't progress onto other chronic health conditions. So you can work with a functional medicine doctor, a naturopathic doctor, a dietitian to figure out if there are any foods that you are intolerant to that might be causing inflammation in your body. You can do an elimination diet. There's definitely testing that you can do to see if you're intolerant to foods. So really, I suggest that not just women with PCOS, but everyone in general should find out if they have any food intolerances too, because it can really affect your health long term. Okay, so believe it or not, those are my first 5 tips on how I have been naturally managing my PCOS over the past year. So I hope that you found this helpful. If you did, you can check out some of the other videos I've linked down below that go into more depth of these topics. Stay tuned for next week's video where I give you my other 5 tips, and I will see you then, I hope. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.